experience, but she's also service director, and she's the clinical dean, overall responsibility for undergraduate medical education, but she's been a long-standing interest in medical education both locally and nationally, so she's heavily involved with supporting people to come over to the UK. She's the director of the CRIS courses and faculty member in many JAG accredited courses across the world. She's joined college, she's intercollegiate examination, general surgery. She's also been awarded honorary prizes for University of Nottingham. And she's the first lady member, she wrote woman, but first lady member, and now secretary of the Surgical Club of Great Britain. So quite an extensive bio. What she is an incredible lady who, even in the UK, wow, this is fancy. This is fancy. What I can see.
More fancy.
So I know that works, that's great. So what I'm going to do is going to try and give her a call, and hopefully she'll be able to communicate with us over Skype. Just trying to connect. I'll just try on this one as well, Jane. Is it coming through on FaceTime?
It is, yes.
So if you could pick that one up, it might come up on the audio on this. Hello? I can see you now.
Ah, that's better. I'll turn the volume up.
So can we just test again, Jane, that you're coming through?
Hello?
Yeah, that's fine. I can hear you. That's brilliant.
Okay.
Hiya, Jane. I've just done your bio, which I found impressive. So it's very important. I'm just bringing up your presentation now. I must thank you for your time. Do realise, ladies and gents, in the UK this is 6:30 in the morning. Jane's been up especially to come and do this before she goes to work at King's Mill and all her other commitments today. So as you can see, I've got the first slide up, Jane.
But I think it'll be pretty obvious when we move from one to another. So I've got a copy of the slides in front of me. So if you can go on to the next slide.
Yep. What do you expect?
When you get the cube.
Yep.
Minutes to do this. What are you thinking?
So I've got the first slide up, Jane. Sorry, there was a little bit of a pause.
Okay, well you tell me if I need to slow down or whatever.
No problem.
It's 5 degrees in Sheffield and dark.
It's 30 here, Jane.
Can you see me?
I can. Drinking your cup of tea with your scarf around your neck.
Correct. Yes, it says I'd rather be in the garden. That's not quite true on my mug.
So I've got your first slide up, Jane, of buildings in London, etc. Houses of Parliament.
Okay. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. I can't see you. I can only see the top of Paul's head, but never mind.
If I move it too much, Jane, then the audio won't work, I'm afraid.
Oh, all right. Don't worry. Well, I'll talk to the ceiling then. So Paul has asked me to talk about a little bit about training and working in the UK. And what I thought would be interesting to start with is just to think about some of the differences, the potential differences, working in Pakistan and working in the UK. So hopefully you can see a picture of Karachi and a picture of London. And I'd just like you to, for a minute, talk to the person sitting next to you about your initial reaction. What do you think might be different working in the UK versus working in Pakistan?
Jane just asked you to talk amongst yourselves for a second to think about what do you think would be the difference between working in the UK to that of Pakistan. So, and then no doubt she's going to ask you for your... So
yes, and then we'll get Paul to shout out some of the comments that are made.
So what do you think is the differences between working in the UK to working in Pakistan?
Do you want the mic?
We're just going to give them a mic, Jane.
Okay, that's fine.
Hello, Jane. Hello, Jane. Can you hear me?
Zia's here as well, if you remember Zia.
I do. Hello, Zia.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you, Jane? Nice to
Hi.
hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. So since I've worked in UK at the Kingsmill Hospital, I personally feel that the main difference is in UK we are more organized, and truly speaking, we are more, at some aspect, more ethical. We have a proper system which we have to follow. And in Karachi, the things are not more organized and they are not monitored very well. And as we can see on the pictures which you have showed, that in the Karachi there is too much busy chaos, and in London it's a lot of peace. So that's what I think.
Basically Zia is saying is that he feels that the UK system is more organised, Jane, and is more structure and guidance to it, and that there doesn't appear to be as much structure and organisation within a Pakistan system, is what he's saying, and more of a collective thought.
Okay. So, well, Zia, had you been on call?
One more striking thing Jane's been commented. Accountability. So there is an accountability in the UK where there's a lack of accountability over here in Pakistan. That's another comment.
Well, I think those are two very perceptive comments, certainly about the UK situation. I've never worked in Pakistan, so it's very difficult for me to comment, but I have talked to a number of people, obviously, who've come over to the UK from Pakistan. In response to Zia's comment, had he been on call the last weekend I was on call, so that's the weekend before last, I'm not sure that he would have, he would hold to what he said, because our medical director's comment on that weekend was that it was the most difficult, challenging, chaotic weekend for 5 years, and that's because of the strain the National Health Service is under. I think the other point about accountability is well made. I think what I wanted to start talking about today was just to briefly touch on the cultural differences between the UK and Pakistan. So Pakistan is obviously a relatively young country, an Islamic country, the UK has a strong Christian tradition, although it's a much more secular country now than it used to be. Certainly, our oldest hospitals were all founded by Christian communities attached to monasteries. Those Barts in London, St Thomas's, really, well-known hospitals throughout the world. That's what their origin is. And there is, a lingering Christian legacy as far as they are concerned. So that's a bit about the cultural context. We now live in a particular state where equality and diversity are valued, as is the sort of freedom of the individual. And that may be very different to the culture in Pakistan. So moving on to think about my specialty, surgery. Hopefully Paul's going to bring up the next slide.
I have done.
And I think the really...
Oh, go on pause.
About the operation. That is an important part, a vital part of surgical care. But now, in surgical training, in the examinations and in clinical practice in the UK, the generic skills of being a doctor, of clinical practice, are valued, I would say, equally or even more than technical skills. We'll move on to the next slide.
Chris?
So, yes, so I would say one of my observations would be that many doctors coming from overseas, certainly in the specialty I'm in as surgical trainees, they're very keen to do the technical stuff, but they are less conversant with, for example, recognising, assessing and managing acutely or critically ill patients. And that's been an issue in the UK as well. That's been addressed over the last 30 years. And so, for example, the Royal College of Surgeons has devised what's called the Care of the Critically Ill Surgical Patient course. And that is now part of basic surgical training, called surgical training in the UK. It's a 2-day course, and where it teaches trainees from all specialties to recognise, assess and treat acutely or critically ill surgical patients. And quite frankly, I think it's the best course I've ever been on. I used to be a chief course director, and I think it's become foundational to surgical practice. I don't know whether anybody in the room has.
So Jane's asking, has anyone done any course such as the CRISP course in the room? No? Nobody's done that course, Jane?
It hasn't been franchised to Pakistan as yet. Okay. Moving on, Paul.
Duties of a registered doctor.
Yes. So the General Medical Council in the UK oversees all medical practice. So it sets the curriculum for medical education. it grants licenses to both providers of education at medical schools and to every qualified doctor. That's doctors when they graduate, when they leave university, and doctors who are on the specialty register after completing their postgraduate training. So the GMC, and it's the body, the regulatory body in terms of professional conduct, and it provides guidance about how we practice. So the headlines are, as far as the GMC is concerned, that patients, as it says on the slide, must be able to trust a doctor with their life and with their health. And in order to justify that trust, we must be able to show respect for human life and to ensure that our practice meets the standards they expect. And these are split up into 4 things: knowledge, skills and experience, safety and quality, communication, partnership and teamwork, and maintaining trust. So you can see that the attributes we would perhaps first think of in terms of knowledge, skills and experience, they're only one of the 4 domains. So the others are considered equally important. And training and assessment UK tests all those domains. So, for example, in university exams, before people graduate as doctors, they would be expected to explain the certification or to actors who are acting as patients. People would be expected to explain simple issues like what's having a blood test involved, what are the benefits and hazards of a blood transfusion, for example. In terms of safety and quality, we're expected to audit our own practice and to benchmark that compared with the practice of others. Just give you a couple of examples. So moving on to the next slide, Paul.
Very busy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not actually going to talk through this in detail, but that's really just to show you some more of the detail that populates each of these domains. So just think: knowledge, skills and performance, safety and quality, communication, partnership and teamwork, maintaining trust. All medical care, all clinical care in the UK is provided in teams. Increasingly, doctors work in shifts, and although there is cover 24/7 in acute environments, there are a vast number of people involved in providing. So, for example, I, as a consultant surgeon, am involved in a number of teams. So I'm involved in a team of 10 consultants who provide an on-call rota for our specialty in the hospital in which I work. There is an administrative team that supports us. There is a team in the outpatient clinic. There is a team in the operating theatre. There is a team in the endoscopy unit where Paul and I spend a fair amount of time. There is a team on the inpatient wards looking after people who are admitted for more than a day. There's a team on the day case unit. There are postgraduate and undergraduate education teams. So in other words, practicing as a doctor inevitably means you will be a member of multiple teams working in a complex environment. And we are expected to be able to team lead when required, and also to be to function well and play our part as a member of those teams, and also to value other team members who may come from other professional backgrounds. Thank you, Paul. Next slide.
It's on, Jane.
So this is just to mention the surgical colleges. Surgical colleges, England, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dublin, oversee surgical training in the United Kingdom, and the joint colleges now are the examining body both for postgraduate qualifications for MRCS and for National Fellowship. And they set curriculum for core and specialist training. And in order to be included on the specialist register, you have to both pass these exams and also satisfactorily complete your on-job professional training and have that signed off by the regional training body where you work. Last slide.
It's up, Jane.
Thank you. So just really a few facts and figures. I was looking through these yesterday. So the medical workforce in the United Kingdom last year, nearly 300,000 doctors, of whom 25% come from overseas, outside the European Economic Area. So that's from places like Pakistan and India, Malaysia. 14% of doctors work in the UK come from other European countries. Interestingly, 45% of doctors in the UK are now women. More than 50% of students now at medical school are women. 54% of trainees are women. 32% of consultants are overall. That number will vary between specialties. In my specialty, general surgery, only 9% of consultants are women. So if you come to work in the UK, there is a very real possibility that your boss may be a woman. How do you feel about that?
Women bosses?
Depends on the boss.
Depends on the boss, Jane. I like you.
Who said that? Who said
I
that?
did. No, Saad said, depends on the boss.
Exactly. There are lots of medical students in the UK. There's a whole issue at the moment about understaffing in the NHS. The government says they're going to increase the number of specialists, but the reality is, of course, that will take 20 years because people need to go to university school, and so university first, and then be educated as an undergraduate and a postgraduate. So it's a real challenge. So there are many opportunities for doctors who are coming from overseas, although the current political chaos does not make that easy. And in fact, Paul, that was not my last slide. My last slide has two pictures on,
Yep, I've got them up.
which is where Paul and I work. So we have Sherwood Forest Hospital, Kings Mill site by day and looking even more picturesque by night.
Absolutely brilliant. Jane, can I ask, because it's a question that I think really is being asked, what do you think is the biggest issue we have with any doctor coming from overseas as with regards performance or within the UK setup? Is there any issue that is commonly raised its head on a common basis?
Thanks, Paul. I think it's potentially a huge cultural adjustment. I think that let's take the example of folk coming from Pakistan. I mean, I think there is a lot that is in common in terms of the model of education, because I think historically, there were things with the Indian subcontinent, and they are helped in some respect because of the similar patterns in education. So there's a good common basis. I think the whole way the NHS works, and that takes a considerable amount of adjustment. I think patients' expectations about how they will partner in decisions about their treatment are probably challenging to folk when they come. I think the expectation about what will be explained to people in terms of their treatment. I think we have the UK incredibly impatient. I think that's partly driven by instant access to information on the intranet. So people expect answers now. I think it's interesting to ponder on what a system that is free, or the effect of a system that is free at the point of delivery. That doesn't mean we don't pay, but people, there may be a perception that people don't value the treatment in the way that might be if they pay.
Did you hear
they
that
might
point,
do
what
if they
Jane
paid
said?
for it.
The major point Jane said is that patients are the drivers, and patients may, because the care that we offer them in the UK is free at the point of delivery, maybe they don't respect that care that you give.
Yeah.
And patients in the UK are heavily educated within their care because of the internet, and that, surprisingly, Jane, is coming over here as well.
And some of that is good information, and some of it is misinformation. So sometimes we're talking to people who are, knowledgeable, but sometimes can be really challenging to dispel the misinformation they've acquired online.
I get sick of telling patients, Jane, if you want an opinion by Dr. Google, go and get Dr. Google and goodbye. I get sick of it.
Yeah, but Dr. Google can't do endoscopy or operate, can he? So that's good.
And the second question I'd like to ask you, Jane, just before I hand you over to the audience, there's something that I heard yesterday which to me, it'll become apparent when I ask you the question. What would you do, Jane, if a patient slapped one of your juniors?
I would explain to the patient that was unacceptable behaviour, and they had essentially terminated the doctor-patient relationship.
Jane's being diplomatic. Jane would. There would be a bit more of a stern discussion than what she's intimating. I know, Jane. So, ladies and gentlemen.
That's completely completely unacceptable. Completely
It's
unacceptable.
commonly happening over here.
What does it? Paul, what does Zia think about what we've said? Does he want to offer a comment?
Zia, she's asking what your opinion is about what's been said, about the discussion.
Just put him on the spot.
I'll put him on the spot, Jane. He was probably yakking.
First of all, it should not have happened. Can you hear me, Jane?
Just about. You're sounding quite a long way away, which of course you are.
He thinks he's got the microphone on, Jane, and he hasn't.
Ah.
So he has to stay there.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Can you see me?
Well, if you
Yes,
don't
I
want to see him, don't pull because then they can't hear.
Okay. So, first of all, I think it should not have happened, surely.
You're talking about the whole topic, or
You're talking about the topic, not that situation.
Yeah,
The whole topic.
the whole lecture you're talking about?
The things which are happening here in Pakistan just needs to be improved, and we are working on it. And we should have a formal bodies who should monitor all the things which are working in the. And we are divided into two public and private sector hospitals vastly. And our elite class are people who can afford, they generally go to the private hospitals. And our people who cannot afford, they go to the public sector hospital. And the people who cannot afford, and generally they are not very literate too, so they can be managed and treated as the doctors and the health workers want. And they are not being provided the facilities which they should have. And on the contrary, in the private hospitals, the patients who are paying loads of money, and they come over to the doctors. And so we should have a uniform system, first of all. And we should be able to cater the health of every individual equally. And there should be a body, as Dr. Saad said, that we should have an accountability for everyone, doctors and the healthcare providers. So these are the things which I really miss here, and which is very well organized, and there's a proper system in UK. And in fact, they have a proper governance every 3 monthly, 6 monthly, and they So and they work on it, and they monitor every individual, how senior he is, how junior he is. It doesn't matter for the NHS, and everyone has to follow, and everyone has to work and abide by the rules. That's the important thing, because at our part, we doctors are not working and not doing our work as we should do. So that's
I think what you said is absolutely right. I think perhaps people from who haven't been to the UK as yet from Pakistan will be surprised at the degree of regulation in the public sector. That really has led the way compared with the private sector. The private sector has had to catch up, but absolutely now one is expected to have the same standard of care in both the public and the private sector. And I would say now, the people sometimes in the private sector have got into trouble because the standard of care has not been as good as in the public sector.
True. The public perception, Jane, in the UK is that the private sector is better than the public sector.
Say that again.
The private sector, to a lot of patients, they believe they get a better standard of care, and it's absolutely rubbish.
Not true. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the time that puts the NHS off, you see. If you did not have so much delays in NHS, people would not go to the private sector. The reason for people going to private sector, by and large, is the delay that usually takes place. And if you want to get something privately done, you can get it done very quickly. Whereas NHS might take a little time.
The only thing that saved the private sector, as I see it, was the insurance in the recent years. The 2-week wait actually really capped out a lot of private patients.
Yeah, the waiting times have fallen dramatically, and so now I would say there are, in one sense, there are fewer people like me who now work. So I now don't work in the private sector at all, and that's increasingly becoming the case. So, I mean, there still is a private sector in the UK, but as waiting times have come down, there are a lot less people going to the private sector.
Absolutely. Has anybody else got any questions? Because I'm just bearing in mind Jane's time, she's got to get to work and things. So she's took a lot of time out of her day to, and you probably not think it, but this delays her significantly. So please, if you've got any questions, now's your time to ask. She supports education, she supports individuals, and she'll support anybody who has a question and anybody who's in need. And that's not me just saying that about Jane because she's here on the phone. I know Jane for many years, and she is exceedingly behind a doctor who needs help and support. I think the problem that I see sometimes for some doctors who come from overseas, not as he came to us, but they are frightened to ask for help. They come across and they are frightened and worried, and they perceive that they know the answers to everything, and they may know the textbooks, but interpreting the textbook and people, and also you're coming from a different cultural background, looking after patients who are from a different culture, a different ethnic group, and then coming to the UK, predominantly Caucasian, their disease processes are slightly different in how things manifest themselves, and we forget that, and to refer it to a medical book all the time isn't the right way. And if you remember back to what Jane said at the early stages, it's about looking at the patient and working with the patient and talking to the patient and including the patient in the disease process, and they're managing their illness with the patient. That's succinctly what she was saying, and that's sadly with some doctors who come from overseas not done an awful lot. That's my opinion. Would you, Jane, last words before I say?
Paul, yes, Paul, can I just tell folk about a conversation I had yesterday afternoon with one of our current trainees who comes from overseas, and he had been meant to have an appraisal with me a few weeks ago, for which he did not turn up. He didn't arrive, and this was the subject of some concern. And he came to see me yesterday, obviously somewhat anxious. This wasn't an appointment that I had sought particularly yesterday, as I was trying to put together this presentation for the emailing tool. But basically, he was struggling. His grandfather had died. His mother had broken her leg and was not recovering well. And he was basically anxious and lonely. So I said to him, two things, who are your support network? And you need to understand that you must get your portfolio sorted out. I know you've got the information, but unless you deal with this, you will get reported to the GMC and you won't be able to practice. So I think, what I'm saying is trying to reinforce that, you could find yourself in a challenging place, being in a foreign country, in a culture that is a bit different. There are lots of people around who are willing to support you, but it's important also that you have a personal support network, and also that you will have to comply with the regulatory requirements. The GMC will not negotiate with you on that. But there are lots of opportunities. One last thing, the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh run a mentoring scheme for overseas doctors in placements in the UK, and I'm sure there are other schemes available as well. That's just one that I know about. So it is possible.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Jane, for your time. So, everybody...
A pleasure.
Jane's taken...
I only wish I could see you.
Oh, there you go, Jane. And I'm better. A little bit better, anyway.
Good.
So, You look after yourself, and there's your audience, Jane, just to let you know.
Thanks for listening.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Jane.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So you may or may not understood Jane. She's an absolute wonderful doctor. She's a wonderful person. I know her on a personal level as well as professional, and she's very keen on supporting. The issues that she wants you to say is that there are mentorship schemes to support people when they come to England. I think sometimes people come across and you don't want to share difficulties. You know, being a doctor, you're very isolated. Things have changed. They're not the same as when Saad first went over and when Vakar went over. Saad's come back. And I'll be honest with you, I feel very embarrassed when I sit down and listen to how certain people have been treated in the past. I'm not saying it still doesn't happen, but to have people who are excellent in what they do as people, but also in their work, to be treated in a certain way by their own peers and colleagues is in my opinion, is not acceptable. My own statement is that you judge a person by his work, not by anything else. You shouldn't judge by skin colour or anything like that, judge them by their work. And the bonus is if you get on with somebody, then that's an absolute bonus. But from the UK standard, there are a lot of doctors. There's a big call for doctors. There will be a big call in this country on doctors. The GMC are going to send over people. Everybody's going to try and recruit doctors from developing countries, bring them over. Because as Jane's alluded, we cannot supply the demand that is out there. We can't. It's not possible. And it's going to grind to a halt. But the regulation that's in the UK is massive. And if you're not ready for regulation, audit, answering to, being accountable, you've heard what Jane said about this registrar not coming now, and he's got personal problems, but if he'd have come and declared his personal problems to Jane, she wouldn't also be talking about referral to the GMC. So these are the things that are quite difficult. Saad, have you got anything to say?
No, I think that's tough. I think when you go, wherever you go to work, you need to find out about what is the system there. You need to be aware of it, you need to be prepared for it, and really you need to adapt. Wherever in the world you would go and work, you will have to adapt, and that's. And when you go there, go to any place to learn. You've got to get there, be part of that system to get the most out of it. So you need to forget about everything else. You know, the focus is to learn. And if you are a hard-working, honest, keen learner, then that system allows you to achieve that. Whatever biases or a little bit of prejudice that is there, it doesn't affect your targets of learning.
Can I just say recently I was sent a document, and the prejudice isn't Saad. I'm not talking about Saad's situation, but I bet you Saad had issues with some of his colleagues who were a little bit reluctant to accept him because of where he was from. I know for a fact I've got colleagues who I have known for years who I respect who are now coming up to retirement. If you're not a graduate of the UK, forget it. You're not going to work in the UK as a consultant, and I can tell you that's for real. But recently there was an article in the Daily Express. And the Daily Express is a tabloid paper, but in the Daily Express, a patient said, "I want a white doctor to treat me." There wasn't a white doctor available. They were acutely ill. And it was an Asian doctor who was there. I don't know what country, but it was an Asian doctor. They refused treatment. That's their choice. But the issue is that I have with it is because of whatever culture or wherever somebody comes from, that doesn't make them a better doctor or a worse doctor. The person's there to try and do their best, and that's the underlying thing. To have patients saying such things, man, it makes me angry to actually hear that being said, and it's very upsetting. But just as a funny side note, some people use their cultural and ethnic background as an advantage. So as you know, even though my accent is predominantly English, I'm also from Ireland. And I always remember a guy about 12 years ago, he wanted to go into the government and he wanted to be elected as a member of parliament in Ireland. And he was from India. And his campaign logo, which was on all everywhere, was, "You've had the cowboys, now give the Indians a chance." Now, I thought that was hilarious. So people can use it. He didn't get in, I'm afraid. Any questions? No? Lovely. What are we doing now?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No. I think there's a couple of cases to do, and then it's just.
Are we ready?